Story 1. That moment when someone waves, you wave back, and then realize it was for the person behind you. I have never recovered. Story 2. My husband and I went out for brunch at a small restaurant with closely spaced tables. The couple to our right had clearly broken up, but the man was begging the woman to get back together with him. He ordered food while she did not, so he was sitting there, pleading for another chance while eating, and she was just sitting in her chair, not even touching her drink. I think we spoke maybe 5 words to each other the whole time. It was difficult not to just sit back and witness the situation. Story 3. My band was playing at a church youth conference when I broke a string on my guitar. After we finished the song, I asked if anyone had a spare G string before I could think about how it sounded. I stood on stage while all the leaders, pastors, and parents shot daggers at me with their eyes. I wished I could disappear. We did not get invited back. Story 4. Sitting in the back of a taxi, I was talking to the driver. Then I realized they were on their Bluetooth headset speaking in a foreign language to a relative. Story 5. A coworker spoke negatively about the boss to at least 4 different people while the boss stood behind them. We all gestured for him to stop, but he continued until one of us said, "Oh, hi, boss's name," which caught his attention. She calmly suggested, "Can we talk in my office?" He kept his job, but he looked dejected for about a week afterward. Story 6. I was attending a funeral. The person who died loved riding horses, so they decided to play a song about it. They chose Old Town Road by Lil Nas X. Imagine all of us standing there for 3 minutes in silence, sadly looking at the ground while they played the song. I felt like I was in a sitcom. Story 7. At Chuck E. Cheese with family and the kids, a young woman walked in very determined. She passed me and stood just 2 feet away while her partner was with another girl. Cheating at Chuck E. Cheese is outrageous. They were all definitely in their early 20s, not kids or even teenagers. Her partner and the other girl weren't with kids or family. They were secretly meeting at Chuck E. Cheese, thinking they were being clever. Someone must have informed her because they started cursing and shouting, despite the kids being everywhere. Classy behavior. Story 8. He proposed. She said no, but not just no. More like, "You jerk. How many times do I have to tell you no?" Story 9. Back in high school, I got stuck in the science wing while O Canada was playing. One of my teachers, who I had for communication technology and who also taught science, was rushing to get to his room, slipped, and landed flat on his back. I felt awful because he was a great teacher, but it was really hard not to laugh. Story 10. I was walking behind someone in the supermarket when I noticed that he started breathing heavily. He stopped, and suddenly a torrent of hot liquid waste and blood hit the floor. A store worker rushed to the scene and slipped in the mixture of feces and blood. I remember thinking how awkward it was. Story 11. I saw a man cuff his hand behind himself and smell it while I was shopping for underwear at a store. I realized I have plenty and don't need any more. Story 12. I was enjoying a latte at a cafe in the small seating area behind where they prepare beverages when a couple sat down a few tables away. We were the only ones there, and they might not have noticed me in the back, but it was such a small area that it was hard not to overhear their conversation. I got the impression that they had met online and this was their first in-person meeting. I mostly blocked them out as I flipped through magazines, but eventually, something about his manner drew my attention. He told her that he had been adopted as a baby and grew up in a basic middle-class family, with no complaints there. However, as an adult, I'm guessing he was in his mid-30s at this point, he decided to find his birth parents. He learned that they had become pregnant in high school but didn't want to drop out of school, so they decided to put the baby up for adoption. They then completed college and eventually started a very successful business, becoming wealthy and living in Switzerland, enjoying a great life. He had contacted them, but it sounded like they either didn't want to meet him or establish a relationship. He said it was no big deal and that he loved his adoptive family, but the way he kept repeating it made it clear that he was troubled. He felt he only had a nice but average life and missed out on an enviable international lifestyle because of the timing. They were positioned so that his back was to me and she was facing me, and when I looked up, her face had that "how do I get out of this gracefully" kind of trapped expression. This was more than 20 years ago, And I have to wonder how much more common these experiences are with the prevalence of genetic testing services and ancestry research tools. Story 13. Someone tried to get a crowd to sing along with him at the airport, but people just minded their own business or gawked at him. Story 14. I accidentally walked in on two people having sex in a public bathroom outside a school, completely naked on the floor. It is astonishing how far people will go just to seek pleasure. Story 15. I saw a woman being intimate with her boyfriend on a bench outside McDonald's while I was standing next to her son. It happened in broad daylight in the middle of the day. Story 16. I'm at a concert and I purchased the wrong seat, so I had to stay up in the mezzanine. My friends were all on the floor having a great time. The band was amazing and the atmosphere was fantastic. It was difficult being up there as I couldn't even watch the band because every spot along the railing was taken, and it was crowded. So I had to lean against the back wall and watch the concert on a delayed television. At one point, a couple made their way next to me, and for the next 30 minutes, I had to listen to them argue and yell. It became really awkward when the guy started to cry quite hysterically, while the girl sat there with her arms folded, still yelling. I stood there awkwardly holding a drink, silently enjoying the music, while listening to their relationship deteriorate. I don't have specifics, but it had to be the loudest I've ever heard someone cry. That night was disappointing. The cherry on top was when my friends and I were leaving. I ended up with the broken seat on the ride home, so I spent the entire 2-hour drive staring at the ceiling of the car. Story 17. I saw a young couple meeting for a first date in a tiny coffee shop in Manhattan. There was hardly any room for privacy. It was a train wreck. I couldn't leave because there was a crazy hailstorm outside. The owner was chasing people out if they didn't buy something. Some random girl was about to be put out, so I bought her a coffee, and she sat at my table right next to this attractive pair in their 20s. It was awful. He kept staring at his phone. He told her his friend worked at a bar, and she reminded him that she did not drink. There was silence for several minutes. Then he told her she looked like her photo. She replied that she had just sent that to him, followed by more silence and him staring at his phone. The girl at my table kicked my foot under the table and whispered, "Help him. This is a disaster." He then suggested they should go get a drink, mentioning again that his friend works at a bar. "Oh my God." She repeated that she didn't drink. More silence with him scrolling on his phone. The girl at my table covered her eyes and mouthed, "I can't watch this. Help him." I decided not to help him. According to the girl at my table, he was a very good-looking guy, but he appeared to have zero personality. As soon as the rain stopped, I left. The girl at my table, a complete stranger, grabbed my arm as soon as we got outside and said, "That was so uncomfortable. You let your boy drown back there." I didn't know him, and I'm sure he gets plenty of dates based on his looks alone. I wasn't going to throw him a lifeline. We laughed for a minute and went our separate ways. It was really bad. Poor girl. Story 18. A woman and a man were engaged in one-sided passionate love on a park bench along an extremely narrow path that stretches for about 3 or 4 miles. If I turned around and walked back, I would have to take a much longer route to my destination, so I continued walking and tried not to laugh. He was making loud grunting and squealing noises, while she was playing a mobile game on her phone. I think it was Candy Crush. I will never understand why they chose such a spot at that time for such an act. Story 19. As a food runner and sometimes server, I approach a table when they are about to pray or are praying. It is a moment of respect. Story 20. I was at the zoo when they kept the animals in cages rather than in habitats. The lion enclosure was about 4 feet high, surrounded by large bars. There was a small lawn area, then a fence that one could lean against to observe the animals. Inside the enclosure, the lion had 2 doors to access the interior of the building. Since the animals were essentially in confinement and bored, they would walk out one door, move along the bars, and turn to go back out through the second door, repeating this pattern continuously. I was positioned parallel to the door the lion came out of. He walked toward me, hesitated, sniffed the air, and turned to follow the bars. Standing about 10 feet away from me was a man also watching the lion. Before the lion turned to go through the second door, he hesitated again and sniffed the air. He made the turn, stopped, lifted his tail high, and urinated all over the man. The man yelled and swore at the lion, who calmly resumed his walk. I have never been happier in my life to pass the sniff test. I always wondered what the man told his family when he got home. Story 21. I witnessed a man run down 3 flights of stairs at my previous apartment to punch his girlfriend in the face, likely breaking her jaw and possibly injuring the bone around her eye. This was in response to her keying his car and shouting insults at him. Afterward, he sat down and waited for the police. The entire incident happened in about 15 seconds. I stood there with my arms full of groceries, shocked by what I had just seen. Story 22. A man waiting to cross the street with others around unzipped his pants and started urinating. He didn't even hold himself. He then proceeded to cross the street with his pants still unzipped. Story 23. I attended a football match in a relatively small but packed stadium. During the break, a man proposed to his girlfriend over the speaker, and the entire crowd booed him. It was glorious. Story 24. My friend is trying to lose weight. 3 of us were on a park bench discussing it. The 2 of us at one end got up first. You can imagine how that went. Story 25. A few weeks after a manager was fired for violence on the job, one of the cashiers discovered she was pregnant and that he was the father. They decided to start dating and make it work. During her lunch breaks, they would walk around the sales floor talking to people as a couple. She was a kind and sweet young woman, and everyone was friendly toward her. Meanwhile, a man with a beet red face stood there silently, fully aware that everyone being nice to his partner was explicitly ignoring him. Despite this, they continued their interactions, which made the situation awkward. Story 26. There was a beggar at a railway station who was exposing himself. Once, I saw a man urinating in public, which made me feel disgusted. Story 27. 2 intoxicated individuals were airing their relationship grievances at a crowded outdoor event in a large park with over 2,000 attendees. It was likely beneficial for her, as the man continued to move as if he were about to make physical contact. People stood around watching, with several men appearing eager to intervene, inching closer as they waited for the intoxicated man to make a move. Eventually, they exchanged final insults and walked off in opposite directions. It was totally surreal. Story 28. An intoxicated elderly man on a bus full of passengers had his plastic bag tear at the bottom, causing cans of beer and adult magazines to fall out. No one would have noticed it until he screamed, "Oh, I'm so ashamed," for a solid 5 minutes. Story 29. I waved at Keith from Pottery Throwdown, thinking I knew him. He waved back. I am not sure if I was more embarrassed by that. Story 30. This is what happened rather than witnessing. One time, my ex and I were having intimacy in the disabled toilets because we had good space. I guess we forgot to lock the door, so a random lady stepped inside and then screamed when she realized what she saw. I swear I'm not making this up. Fun times. Edit. It was a door that you just push the button to lock rather than a normal twist lock. Story 31. I was sitting on the bus next to a drunken man. He wasn't disruptive enough to warrant a warning, but he was still annoying to ignore. Story 32. I was driving down the motorway at 3 a.m. in my old car, which looked a lot like a police car. There was a car pulled over on the hard shoulder with both front doors wide open. The 2 passengers were engaged in an intimate act on the other side of the safety barrier. They looked up as I approached. The man quickly pulled up his jeans, used the woman as a stepping stone, jumped into his car, and began to drive off with the passenger door wide open while the woman struggled to hop over the barrier with her leggings down by her ankles. He turned back for her as I went past and realized I wasn't an officer. I hope she had nothing to do with him after that. Story 33. I was on the bus once and saw a man very clearly urinating on the sidewalk, shielding himself from traffic with a tote bag. However, he made no effort to shield himself from the Children's Museum and Science Center we were driving past. It was broad daylight and the museums were definitely open. Story 34. walking through a large parking lot toward the entrance for an outdoor concert with many others. A girl suddenly pulls down her pants, squats, and urinates. Story 35. I was once stuck on a bus next to a young woman whose boyfriend called her just after she got on to inform her that he knew she was cheating and was now breaking up with her. I was unable to escape without losing both time and my seat, so I had to endure an hour and a half of her screaming, crying, and begging her boyfriend not to break up with her, along with the many excuses she had for the affair. The driver didn't care, so the bus kept going until I finally reached my stop. She was still on the bus freaking out for an unknown amount of time after that. I felt somewhat bad for her, though it was definitely her fault from what I heard. It was a lot to endure. Story 36. Not the worst, but the most recent. A woman in her 20s at Target, on the phone with her grandmother while in the customer service line, was loudly arguing about which clothes she had to return. No, Grandma. I like that one. It's purple. Story 37. I saw a homeless man pushing a cart, wearing a dirty clown suit with an even dirtier Mickey Mouse head. I briefly considered calling the police because it was on a crowded street. What was that? Story 38. Freshman year of high school. My choir class and I had to sit in the auditorium while the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps and the Honors Choir practiced for the Veterans Day Assembly. Sitting in the back of the auditorium, I looked to my left and saw a couple under a blanket together. Story 39. A young couple in a cafe sat across from one another, nose to nose, staring intensely into each other's eyes. However, I could tell the woman was forcing it, and the man wanted to look away. She smiled like a Cheshire cat, while his face showed more of a wince. Eventually, after what felt like 5 painful minutes, they pulled away, and he looked at his phone. She seemed ready to stab him, giving off a strong you vibe. Story 40. I was at a boat show in 2001 and walked past a booth promoting a new flavor of alcoholic beverage. It was blasting 10-year-old club dance hits at an excessive volume. There were only 2 people in front of the booth, a young man with Down syndrome who looked to be in his late teens to early 20s and his mother. The young man was dancing in the cringiest way imaginable. He kept shimmying down to the ground while shaking his hips with wild abandon. I could feel the secondhand embarrassment radiating from his mother. As I passed and tried not to stare, she told him it was time to go. The young man wasn't having it. So this woman literally had to guide her 250-pound son away from the booth while he babbled, "Mom, wait. Mom." No hate to anyone. In fact, I hope he is in a good assisted living facility since his mother was clearly not equipped to take care of him. Story 41. 2 colleagues arrived at the meeting room early, not expecting others to show up before the scheduled start time. However, my team and I did, and we witnessed them conversing with F and affectionately stroking her arms. Story 42. At a Yale protest for Palestine, I observed a woman walking into a circle of pro-Palestinian activists who were having a drum circle and dancing. She shouted, "I am a Jew, dox me." But nobody acknowledged her. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.